Here's my story, and I'm sticking to it. In our summer times at the Naval Academy, they took us out to experience all the different things. So on our rising junior year, they took us out and we did an amphibious landing as Marines. Okay. And then they sent us down to Key West and put us on a submarine and took us on a day cruise in a diesel submarine, diesel boat, they call it. And you know what? That thing has no windows. That pretty well ruled that out for me, even though the cherry picking of that year, 1962, was to become involved with Admiral Rickover's nuclear submarine program. So I didn't like that submarine. And then they take you back, they took us back up to Pensacola. And in Pensacola, they took us for a plane ride in the trainer that they were using of the day, which was a T-34B reciprocating engine, 2-seat trainer, tandem, one in front of the other. And it's got a whole window. Everything is a window in that. And I liked the flying sensation, and I thought, okay, this is what we want to do. Well, it's freedom from the earth. It's really like being a bird. Now, in my later experience, I found out that what people want to know the most about is what's it like to go supersonic? Because my combat days were in the F-8 Crusader, and that was the first Navy fighter that was able to go supersonic while in level flight without having to dive. It's sort of like you heard about in the movies and all. And you go to altitude and you pick your trajectory, your direction, so as not to boom the people below and so forth. You document the temperature and the altitudes and the speeds and push it through the sonic barrier, which is some minor shaking and making nothing big. And then when you reach supersonic, or at least well into the transonic range, the airplane smooths out, the controls become very solid, and gets, of course, very quiet because all the airplane noise is behind you now. And so you're rock solid, quiet. At altitude, you don't sense, you look down and you don't sense much movement because you're so high. It's really a satisfying feeling. When you come back out of your afterburner and start slowing down from supersonic to transonic and then into the subsonic range with a little shaking going on, and then you get back to your normal feeling on the controls, and you're just up there looking down again. And the thing about high altitude flying is, if you're coming cross country on high altitude flying, your landmarks are city to city to city, especially at night. And you see the city lights, let's say coming back from the west, coming back in, you see Memphis, and then you see Nashville, and then you see the Tri-Cities area, and then you see the Greenville area and Charlotte. Very little in between. The big blobs of light at night are the things that you see from that kind of altitude.
And how did you two meet?
Well, when I came out of the Naval Academy on June 6th, I took the first class that was available for the Navy Flight School. And so my friend and I, Dick Hastings, he had a Ford station wagon, and I had a 2-seater MGA, and I needed room to take stuff, and he liked to drive my MGA, so we teamed up and drove from Northern Virginia, where I lived, and he lived while we were in school, because we were both military kids. And so we drove down on Highway 29 all the way to Pensacola. Reported for duty on the Monday that we were supposed to report, and the detailer told us, don't have enough to start the class this week, so come back Monday. So we were all gung-ho and asking what kind of duty we could do, and he said, no, just come back Monday. So that meant I had a week, so Monday to Monday. And later in the week was when I met her. So what was your impression of how we met?
My roommate and I were at Martine's. It was like a large restaurant, and then on the side it had what would you say, short order, like in those days, fast food type place. So we had gone out that night, came back, went to bed, and she was hungry and said, oh, let's go get a hamburger at Martine's. And I said, oh, do we have to? And she said, yeah, I'm starving. So we went to get a hamburger, and we met there at that restaurant that night. And then you all came over.
Well, what
to help
happened
us
next
move the
was
next day.
the friend I was with said, hey, we're going to meet those girls. And I said, how? He said, oh, we'll write them a note. So he wrote a note on a napkin or something that he had. And he said, I'll take the short one. Well, Sandy was the tall one. So they came out, we put the note on their car, but we were in my sports car. So it sits about the height of this desk, and we were sitting in there waiting to see what they would do. And they looked around and kind of giggled and
We
laughed.
didn't see anybody.
And then drove off. So he said, we got to catch them. So we tooled on after them and honking and waving, and finally they stopped. And
It was in front of a pharmacy that we went to.
Safe place.
Yeah, we stopped.
so we introduced ourselves, and then what? We made a date for,
You all came over and helped us move the next day.
yeah, that would have been a Saturday, right?
Yeah, and that was on a Friday night. We got engaged when I went up to visit your family at Christmas that year, and so that would have been December 62. And one of his friends was getting married at the Naval Academy, and so he gave me the ring there in the Naval Academy chapel, and we went to the wedding and everything, and then we got married in March, the end of March.
So March 1963.
He had just finished.
March 30th. So we just had our 60th anniversary.
I remember you said that.
He had just finished at Meridian, your duties at Meridian in Mississippi, and came back to Pensacola
Barely finished.
for training on the what do you call that?
Carrier landing.
Carry landings. And so he missed our rehearsal dinner, our rehearsal, everything that night, because they had plane problems, and so he had 2 flights he had to do that day, remember?
Actually, I did 3. I had
3.
2 flights required, and 1 flight was called off because of a bad radio in one of the planes. So we launched the one, we got that done. We launched the other one, and I should have been done in plenty of time, but we had to go back and get another plane, because there were 4 plane formations was the last graduation flight. And so I had to make actually 3 flights to get that done and check out of the base and finish packing my little car, and 5-hour trip down to Pensacola from Meridian. So I got there about 11:30, and they were all put out because I missed the dinner and missed everything. My mom was there, my sister was there. All the people were ready to go. He didn't know whether I was coming or not.
My fellow Americans, as President and Commander-in-Chief, it is my duty to the American people to report that renewed hostile actions against United States ships on the high seas in the Gulf of Tonkin have today required me to order the military forces of the United States to take action in reply.
When you're a midshipman at the Naval Academy and a senior, you don't pay attention to the news. At least I didn't. So when I signed up for the first class for flight school, and when I got down there, we got involved into the aviation training program, and you definitely don't watch the news. So basically, I went through almost all my flight training without even listening to news or checking news. And so basically, we didn't even know how to spell Vietnam. And then when we got out to California and got into the replacement air group, VF-124, the RAG, we call it, the replacement air group. Then we started to live more normal life and watch the news and hear that Vietnam was cooking off, and figuring out that the reason I got assigned as a fighter pilot on the West Coast was to go to a small carrier, the Hancock, and then be deployed to Western Pacific for Vietnam duty. At the time, it was just a possibility. And in August of '64 was when the North Vietnamese made an attack on naval vessels that is often called the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which some believe was actually staged as an excuse to get us deeply involved in the war. But I'll let you make your own decision about that by studying it.
What are your thoughts on it?
I know some of the people that actually flew on that day, and they're very suspicious about whether it was an actual attack or not. So we tried to start launching the first Alpha strike into North Vietnam after the reprisals for the Gulf of Tonkin incident in the fall of '64. So we started trying to launch that, but remember that's a different season, so the weather's pretty bad. So February, weathered out, starting out, coming back, not successful. And finally, as I recall, it was the first week in March when we launched an operation called Flaming Dart. And basically what that is, an Alpha strike, all the carriers launch all their planes. They launch at least 2 attack squadrons and 2 fighter squadrons each. And they're each assigned a target. You join up, you go in, and the fighters go in first and launch their ordnance against any aircraft so that it keeps the heads down while the bombers go into their run, call it flag suppression. Our target that day on that first one was a high overcast, and there was enough room under the overcast for us to actually make the bombing runs without blowing ourselves up. The target assigned was an underground ammunition storage area where the bunkers were under dirt piles. So it looked like a kind of a lumpy grass field. Well, there was no anti-aircraft, so we had the 5-inch folding fin Zuni rockets on our airplane. So at that time we had to learn that you only make one run. What happened was it became like an old Indian attack on a covered wagon train, circling airplanes, and the first ones launched in there okay. We came in, we came across, then we came back for the second run. But in the meantime, the bombers made their run a little further over, and then the other fighters came in, and then the other bombers came in, and by that time we had airplanes crossing each other over the target. So the miracle was that we never had a mid-air collision. We didn't run into anybody. The result of the attack were that we basically disturbed enough earth so they could plant a spring garden. We had no secondary explosions or any other evidence that the ordnance that we were using was penetrating deep enough to blow anything up that was down there. So that was the first one. And we learned from that, and we got gradually better as we went along. The longer we did this, the more active their anti-aircraft fire got. If you catch them by surprise, you'd only catch them by surprise once. So the second run, they're not surprised, they're ready. If they have anything left to shoot with, then everything they got left to shoot with, they're going to be shooting. So you get more danger and more damage on your airplanes on the second run than you do on the first run and out. We had two kinds of missions, North Vietnam and South Vietnam. The South Vietnamese missions were against Viet Cong and NVA regulars if they came down and brought their regular army down. Up in the north, President Johnson and McNamara were choosing targets that were designed not to win the war, but to punish the North Vietnamese into coming to the negotiating table. So the kinds of targets that were picked for us were not what I would consider essential targets, like the major power plants, dams, and we did attack some railroad depots. We attacked some troop barracks in those alpha strikes. And the follow-on for the first alpha strike was the Rolling Thunder campaign, which again was not designed to win. It was not designed to knock out the enemy. It was just designed to punish them along, to make them want to negotiate to the table. We had some very strange targets.
Were you ever in danger?
Well, every time. And you can tell that by the number of POWs that were captured. My roommate was killed on a mission, shot down, and finally was identified in 2012 in December, and we interned his body at the Naval Academy on May 10th, 2013. So it took a long time to resolve that situation. So yeah, it was dangerous.
We decided that it would be best that I went back to Pensacola because my grandmother couldn't drive her car. My grandfather had died, and so and we had a son that was 6 months old, and we thought it would be best that I go back and be with the family because we had had friends that were killed, you know, before you went to the war. And so we thought that it would be better for me to be back there in case something happened. And so I took care of my grandmother, took her to all her doctor's appointments, and went to church there. And so it was just a better situation. And then my parents lived down the street. And so we had a lot of support. And my uncle and his wife and all their children lived across the street. So it was just a better situation.
We just felt like it's better for her to be around family. Some of the other wives, they decided to stay, and they had like a phone chain that they could call, and of course everybody's worried. And the thing about it that's hardest on the wife is she doesn't know what's going on.
And the mail situation was not good.
I know what I'm doing all the time, but she doesn't. She doesn't know whether I'm safe or what, so it's a big worry for them. So the way we communicated, we had 2 ways. We could write a letter, and 2 weeks later she would get the letter. And then she would write me back, and then 2 weeks later I would get the letter. So none of the news that we got in the letters was current. But we also had, at that time, the little 3-inch reel-to-reel recorders. We could, I bought 2 little battery-powered reel recorders, and we would mail these. We would mail the little reels back and forth. So she would send me recordings of Marty talking and different stuff like that, which was good. And then I would make recording and send to her. We transfer back and forth that way. So it wasn't like today where you can just FaceTime or whatever.
Well, and phone calls were hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, it was.
So only for anniversary and things like that did we do that.
Phone call had to be something special. And usually had to be, we didn't have any communications from the ship like they do now. So we would have to be in port in order to make a phone call. So that's why it was actually harder about knowing what was going on for her than it was for me.
The commanding officer's wife would call if there was, if somebody got shot down or if there was a problem, with any of the guys. And so every time that I would receive a call from her, it would be like, oh no, it could be my husband or whatever. But usually they would send out chaplains or someone to tell the family that someone had been shot down or POW or something like that.
So we spent 2 Christmases apart with me over there.
And birthdays.
And birthdays. Her birthday's on December 26th. When you come back from a cruise, part of the lucky pilots get to fly off and bring planes into the home base in San Diego at Miramar. So I was on the first cruise return, I was flying back in. So I got that plane on the ground, I got out of that thing and I kissed the ground, and then it came running up. You've seen pictures like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And every time we see that with any of the homecoming of the troops or pilots or whatever, tears, because it's a very emotional time.
Yeah.
Very thankful. God answers prayer.
Out of the first 5 years we were married, I was only home half the time. So there's a lot of misunderstandings that come up, especially in those days with the lack of ability to communicate back and forth almost instantaneously.
There are a lot of divorces even in the people that we knew. He would be dreaming about the war and, jump up like he's getting ready to get out of the plane or whatever. And so there's PTSD too. And they didn't like to talk about it that much either. It was part of the after war,
Just live through it.
And we found a really, really good church out there in San Diego, and that really helped us. And we had a wonderful pastor that was used to having, military people in the church. And choir director family just took us in and helped us with babysitting with our kids so we could both sing in the choir. And didn't you teach a class? And I worked in the nursery and everything. So we just, that was our home, our family.
Our spiritual lives really deepened during that time.
We both, yes.
And I also had a good chaplain on the ship. David Plank was his name. And he took me under his wing and helped me with my spiritual life and the pressures of the war and how to be a better Christian.
Yeah.
And so all that together really helped us out if we hadn't had the church family out there, we would have
we'd have been
had
in
a
trouble.
terrible time.
Yeah. Well, and you were drinking too.
Yeah,
The pressure for the PTSD and all that.
I hadn't learned my lesson yet, so that was an issue. And of course, the image of the fighter pilot of that day was not
Top Gun.
pretty much Top Gun thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they all thought they were cool. Not much humility among the fighter pilots. Oh, but it was an experience that I wouldn't want to have to go through again. But it makes you grow up and mature.
Yeah.
To have a family, little kids that you have to take care of and that kind of thing. And our son, when he came back, he was the second time he was
About 18 months.
he was
20 months.
yeah,
something like that.
and Cecil corrected him, and we had been living with all these relatives that had spoiled him rotten, and Cecil was listening to him talk to his grandmother, and he was all excited and wasn't sure what all he was excited about, but everybody else was about him coming back home, and he was sassing my mother, and Cecil corrected him, and he said, he looked at my mom and he pulled on her dress. He said, "Get that man out of my house." And so there were a lot of adjustments for everyone, because the military wife is used to being independent and having to do everything on her own. And then when the husband comes back, it's, like, okay, we have to relinquish the leadership to the man, and that's hard because you've gotten used to being independent, and here I was taking care of my grandmother too, and almost like a child, and so there's a big adjustment for everyone when they come back too. The guy's going through the PTSD, and the wife is having to relinquish the leadership to the husband, and then the children are all confused about what's going on here. Who's that man? Where's that man coming from? And I showed him his picture every day, and he would kiss it, and I would make tapes for Daddy, and then he would send the tapes back, but somehow that just didn't, it's not like now where you have videos and cameras and internet and all that. It was just prehistoric compared to what you have now.
So you would say faith played a big part after you served?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, there were two reasons why I left the Navy. One is that the current administration of that day had no intention of winning the war and was wasting my friends' lives with no eternal value. And so in order to make my life count for more than this war for President Johnson, I resigned my commission and wanted to go into full-time Christian ministry. I didn't know how that would work out, but I took the step and was counseled by pastor, chaplain, commanding officer, most of whom didn't want me to leave the Navy. But I just felt like that the direction that was moving was not satisfactory to me. So I resigned my commission, and we used the GI Bill to go 4 years of seminary. And then we were able to move back to Pensacola, and I served 5 years as an assistant pastor there. And then during that time I became a civilian flying instructor. And a need came up at Bob Jones University for another instructor. So rather quickly it happened that from the time we met and were asked to consider the position,
2 weeks.
Basically 2 weeks we were able to properly resign from the church and move to Greenville, South Carolina. In my 30-year career, turned out to be at Bob Jones University in their aviation department. Since then, as a retiree, I contract with a local flight school that succeeded from Bob Jones University called U.S. Aeroflight. So I'm a contract, now I don't fly anymore, but I'm a contract ground instructor to teach the new instructors how to consolidate their knowledge so that they'll be able to make a good transition from student to teacher. We've hung together as a team for all this time. Our daughter was born in 1967, after I got back from all the combat business. So she doesn't remember anything about that. But we're all proud of both our kids. They've got their own families and a lot of things going on.
A lot of grandchildren.
And this is the
Very thankful.
This is the magnet that has drawn a lot of them back into the area. So we have 2 children, 6 grandchildren, and 9 great-grands now. So that's the good result of our long marriage.
Yeah.
There were quite a number of my squadron mates that are still married to their #1 Navy wife. And we have sometimes that we get together over a Zoom call or something like that.
We went to a reunion of all your F-8 fighter pilot friends out in San Diego, California, a few years ago. That was interesting to see all the guys together and wives.
Yeah, we're all pretty long in the tooth now, so. But so we still have some contact with the folks that we were with there.
Any reflections, Sandra, about the 60 years?
They've been wonderful. God has helped us through some interesting situations in our family, raising children, and we've always been in a local church that has helped us in our marriage and in raising children and everything, because you need the encouragement and help of other people. It's hard in this world to raise children, and I think the advice that we've gotten too from different, mostly Dr. Berg's material and everything about family and that kind of thing, that has helped us a lot. And we attended Freedom at Last at our church, and learned all the a lot of Bible verses, and things like that. Growing spiritually helps us to keep.
Yeah, I think the most recent
Keep close
thing
to
that's
God
happened
and
to us is she's now in remission from a breast cancer of an aggressive sort, and the church family, our deacon and his wife and other members in the church family have really stepped up, and it's not, and they stepped up and really helped us out and prayed for us and helped us a lot. But even our neighborhood people that live around us, they stepped up and helped out.
Young couples that we didn't really know all that well, we've gotten to know better, because they just, gave me Big Mom flowers and gift cards for gas and food, and it's been interesting. And so we've been able to be more of a witness and get to know them because of my cancer. And
so our faith in the Lord is really important to us. And one of the most blessed times of my life was when I found out in 2013 that my roommate that was killed, Dick Laws, had become a Christian and trusted Christ as his Savior. So
his wife told Cecil later that he had talked about making a commitment through you talking to him in your room on the ship, and so that was encouraging with him, being shot down like that. And it was encouraging to her, especially because that helped her to know that he was in heaven.
Yep.
Too.
So, going through the cancer, how long have you been going through that?
Was it last July? Last July I found out, and then I got treatment, chemo and radiation until February 15th, and now I'm in remission and hoping to stay in remission. So, and I was able to, during that whole time, give out tracts and invitations for my church and talk to other people, and have met lots of women, that have had cancer and everything. So we tried to use it, for the Lord by encouraging, helping other people.
So would you say that going through the cancer has strengthened your faith and your marriage?
Yes. I had to rely on God's grace during a lot of those times when I had the chemo go through my port here, and my mom died with breast cancer, and I took leave from Bob Jones from working several months and went down and took care of her. So I had PTSD quite badly with that, about chemo and radiation and everything. And so when I was told that I had cancer, I just envisioned, everything that I had gone through with her, and that was bad because she was sick the whole time, sick at her stomach. And so I had to have chemo, but I didn't get the kind of chemo that made you sick at your stomach. I just had the kind that gave you rashes and a lot of other things. So I had to rely on God's grace during that whole time. And then the radiation, burns you and everything. And I'm having trouble with that right now, and had to go to the doctor last week for some treatment as a result of that. I swelled up and had to be drained, and so I'm still going through that. And with all the support that he gave me and our family and our friends and everything, and God's grace and us keeping in the Word every day, we're going through Spurgeon's book of devotions, and that has just really helped, because it would be invariably something that we needed that day, and then he went to all my treatments with me except one, and my daughter wanted to go to that, so that was good that he was able to get off so he could go with me. And we were able to watch church online the whole time. That's been a real encouragement. And our church did not have, before COVID, did not have online church, and so since that just really helped us to be able to watch church 2 times on Sunday and then on Wednesday nights. So, and then we had a wonderful, wonderful deacon and his wife that just helped tremendously. They just had insight that she was a nurse, and then our next door neighbor was an oncology nurse too previously, and so she helped me by bringing all kinds of things over that she knew that I would need for treatments. And then they even bought us a generator in case the power went out and everything, a portable generator. So we have been blessed. God is good. God is good.
Yeah. And Cecil's been very supportive through it all.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was concerned because he doesn't like being sick or illness, and he was very supportive. he supported me like I tried to support him when he was in Vietnam. You paid me back.
Well, I just am grateful for her support through all the years and time we've had together, and we've got a wonderful family and lots of things going on there that are a blessing that anybody would want.